My name's Jeff, retired SEAL. My dad passed going into high school. I was 14 years old. I always get this sort of reaction, from folks when they're like, you're a Navy SEAL, and they find out my dad was in the Peace Corps, and they view it as two very different things, and I never did. Someone has to be able to stabilize an area so that people like my dad, good people, could come in and do their work.
I met him right before his first deployment. I'd never met anybody that intense. I would ask him a question, and he would very intensely look at me to answer it. He was really smart, really funny, loves people and feels things very strongly, and I was attracted to that.
I remember at some point, I was like 15 years in the service, and I'd never spent more than 3 months consecutively at my home. I was constantly needed to overwhelm myself with activity, movement, for fear of stopping. Because what happens when you stop? And I think that's the cost, is what if you're good at something that isn't good, but necessary in some cases. But that becomes the burden that you have to carry. No one else can carry that. I remember coming back from a deployment, and my oldest son was at church and was singing. And so I was sitting there looking around, and all these parents are smiling, and they've got their video cameras out on their phones, and they're all having a great time. And I'm sitting there, and I just got nothing, like no emotional connection to what I was doing there, with my son. And my wife made this comment that I wasn't the same person. I remember saying, like, yeah, this is me now. Like, that doesn't exist anymore.
It seemed like there were more and more arguments that just kind of got out of control, to where it would almost wouldn't make sense why he was so upset.
So she reached out to the unit that I was at the time and basically asked for help.
And we found out this isn't the first person.
The majority of my peers were all dealing with the same thing.
You hear PTSD, but nobody talked about it.
So from 2014 to 2018, I'd been on antidepressants, but then also stimulants and stuff to help me sleep. And then I'd try to get off of them, and it was painful. It left me with an understanding of how people get to the point where they're done. Probably about 2 years after I'd retired, and I was still on medications, not able to get off of it, I came across a friend who I hadn't seen in a while, and I looked very different than what he was used to seeing me. And then he texted me later and was like, dude, I didn't even recognize you. Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And I was like, struggling, but whatever, man. It's nothing new. And he's like, hey, I went through this treatment and changed my life. All right, man. You say it works, I'll go do it.
That was so far out there that it was like, when he told me that, I was like, what are you talking about? But I think at that point, it was like, he's tried a lot of other things.
So we went down to Mexico. We took the medicine, and it's like nothing's happening. I'm laying down physically in this world, but in this experience, I'm standing up, hovering over 2 giant cylinders that represented the negative and the positive. And suddenly the bottom of those 2 cylinders just opened up, and everything flushed out. And it was incredibly relieving. Like, all that stuff, years, just gone. And I felt my consciousness like kind of fall through myself and like through death, but then somehow everything was in a different direction, and it was like being blasted towards love and just this like graciousness, and what the only way I could describe is what I would imagine God to be like. I remember coming out of it and feeling all the pain and sadness in the world, and it was like overwhelming. It was just like I started weeping and realized that all the things I was so stressed out about, so concerned about, like just are not real. They're not important. And it was incredibly, incredibly liberating. I was able to forgive myself and then have a different perspective of those experiences.
I think he's more accepting of himself, and he's a lot easier on himself. And that, I think, helps his relationships, with me and with the kids. It's not like he's a different person and unrecognizable or, anything like that. It's kind of the Jeff that he was when we met when we were younger.
I was able to make long-term changes, not only just in behavior and habit, but also how I think. That's how you sustain change. The previous approaches of just looking for, a pill or a shot, you're putting the responsibility of healing on those things, as opposed to what plant medicine did was open the door for me to put the responsibility of healing on me, and then make it last.
It's been a hard journey, but I always felt blessed to be on it with Jeff. As hard as it was, I always felt very grateful to be on it with him. When I think about the future, I know that I'll continue the journey with him, and I'm good with that.